Family mocked me as the bargain hunter, until brother found I had $12 million. I shut the door. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. My family laughed at me, called me the bargain hunter, always treating me like I wasn't good enough. But when my brother discovered the truth, that I was sitting on $12 million, everything changed. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Ethan Miller. I am in my mid-40s, and for most of my life, I've kept things simple. I don't buy fancy clothes, I don't drive flashy cars, and I don't care much for expensive vacations. While most people around me chased after the latest trend or bragged about what they could afford, I found comfort in living quietly. Some called it boring. My family thought it was embarrassing. I grew up in a middle-class home with 2 siblings. Ryan, my older brother, always wanted to be the center of attention. He liked showing off, whether it was his new car, his watch, or the way he decorated his house. Sophia, my younger sister, wasn't as loud as Ryan, but she still enjoyed the shine of expensive things. Our parents encouraged us to work hard, but even they quietly admired Ryan and Sophia's lifestyle more than mine. I never really minded being different. What bothered me was the way they treated me because of it. Every family gathering turned into an opportunity for someone to poke fun at me. Ryan would look at my shoes and laugh, saying, "Did you get those at the bargain bin again?" Sophia would join in, joking that I should have a loyalty card for the thrift store. My parents never directly laughed, but the way they smiled at those remarks showed they didn't disagree. Over time, I became known as Dollar Store Ethan. The nickname stuck, and soon I couldn't attend a dinner or holiday without hearing it at least once. At first, I tried to shrug it off, laughing along like it didn't matter. But deep down, it hurt. They didn't see me as a man who made choices. They saw me as someone too poor or too weak to keep up with. I often sat quietly at those gatherings, listening to stories of new cars, new clothes, or trips to exotic places. Nobody ever asked about me, my work, or my life. It was easier for them to assume I had nothing to offer. They believed I was the one struggling to get by, clipping coupons and counting pennies. What none of them realized was that I had been building something far bigger than they could imagine. And the day they found out would be the day everything between us changed forever. Family dinners were always the same. Ryan and Sophia loved turning them into a stage where they could show off. Ryan would arrive in his newest car, the kind that made noise before he even stepped out of it, and he made sure everyone noticed. Sophia would place her designer bag on the table like it was a trophy, often mentioning how much it cost and where she had bought it. Between the two of them, there was always a contest over who had spent more or who had gone to the better place for vacation. I usually sat quietly at the end of the table, eating without much to say. It wasn't that I didn't have thoughts, but there was no space for me to share them. Every time I tried, Ryan would find a way to turn it into a joke at my expense. Once, when everyone was enjoying steak, he leaned back with a smirk and said, "Don't worry, Ethan. One day you'll save enough coupons to afford a steak like this." Everyone laughed, and the sound of it cut deeper than the word. Sophia joined in too, shaking her head like I was the family's permanent disappointment. Our parents never mocked me openly, but their looks said enough. My mom would sigh when she glanced at my plain clothes. My dad would ask short questions about my work, then quickly turn his attention back to Ryan's or Sophia's latest achievement. It was clear they believed I had fallen behind in life, that somehow my choices made me less successful than the other two. At times, I wanted to defend myself, to remind them that I wasn't asking for help and I wasn't struggling the way they assumed. But biting back only would have added fuel to their laughter, so I stayed silent. Silence became my shield. When they laughed, I lowered my head and kept eating. When they bragged, I let them talk until they ran out of things to say. Even though their words hurt, I learned how to hide my feelings. They thought I was embarrassed, and maybe I was, but not for the reasons they believed. I wasn't ashamed of how I lived. I was ashamed of how shallow they had become. To them, life was only about what you could show, not about what you could build quietly. What they never understood was that I wasn't sitting there empty-handed. While they competed over vacations and handbags, I was competing with myself, building something far more lasting. Every joke, every sneer, every dismissive glance, I swallowed with patience. They thought I was weak for staying quiet. The truth was, I was strong enough to wait, because deep down, I knew the day would come when the balance would shift, when all their laughter would stop. And when that day arrived, they would finally see that the man they had called a failure had been holding the biggest surprise of them all. I wasn't living the way I did because I had no choice. It was a decision I made long ago. When I was in my early 20s, I understood something most people around me didn't care about. I saw how quickly money disappeared when people chased the newest thing, and I knew I didn't want that kind of life. I wanted security, freedom, and peace of mind. That meant I had to live differently. Back then, I worked long hours at a job that didn't pay much. But instead of spending my paycheck the way my friends did, I set most of it aside. I didn't need a new car, I didn't need nights out every weekend, and I didn't need to impress anyone. What I did need was a plan for the future. Whenever I had extra cash, I looked for small ways to make it grow. My first step was buying into a small business with a friend who needed help starting out. It wasn't glamorous, and it didn't make me rich overnight, but it gave me a return that I could reinvest. After that, I started looking at real estate. At the time, property was cheaper in certain areas, and I scraped together enough for a down payment. It was a stretch, but I told myself it would be worth it. Years later, that piece of land became one of my best decisions, rising in value far beyond what I had paid. Each time I earned something extra, I put it into another opportunity. Rental properties, small shares in companies, and later, stocks. I wasn't gambling, I was careful. I studied before I put in a dollar. My life stayed simple during all of this because I knew the more I saved, the more I could grow. While others showed off what they had, I was focused on what I was building quietly in the background. 2 decades of discipline and patience paid off. Every step forward added another layer of stability. A property here, a business there, and steady investments in the market. I didn't need to look rich on the outside because I knew what I had on the inside was growing stronger each year. By the time I reached my 40s, I had built a fortune most people wouldn't believe. My net worth crossed $12 million, and yet nothing in my life looked different. I still drove the same kind of car, wore the same kind of clothes, and lived in a house that wasn't designed to impress anyone but myself. To the world, I looked average. To me, I knew the truth. I never told my family, and I never told my closest friends. My wealth wasn't meant to be a spotlight. It was my shield, my safety, and my quiet victory. Keeping it private wasn't about hiding. It was about protecting what I had worked for. They thought I had nothing, but in reality, I had more than I ever dreamed of. One afternoon, Ryan called me out of the blue. His tone was loud and cheerful, and before I could even ask how he was, he launched into a speech about his new house. He went on and on about the neighborhood, the size of the backyard, the expensive kitchen counters, and the new furniture he had already ordered. I listened quietly, giving short replies here and there, but I knew the call wasn't really to connect. It was just another chance for him to show off. When the call ended, I put my phone down and went back to my day. It was the same pattern as always. Ryan living big, wanting everyone to know it. A month later, things started to shift. Ryan called again, but this time the energy in his voice was different. He tried to sound casual, but I could hear the strain underneath. He mentioned how the house payments were heavier than expected and how a few of his investments hadn't gone the way he planned. Instead of admitting that his own choices had led him there, he brushed it off with, "Just bad luck, man. Nothing I could have done." I didn't argue, though I knew luck wasn't the problem. Not long after that, Sophia started dropping hints about her own troubles. Over coffee one weekend, she mentioned her husband's business and how it hadn't done well. She didn't go into detail, but the way she lingered on certain words made it clear things were tight. She laughed it off, saying they'd bounce back soon, but her eyes told a different story. Both of them tried to hide how serious their problems were, but I could see the cracks forming. Ryan wasn't boasting as loudly as before, and Sophia, who once loved talking about her shopping sprees, had gone quieter. What stood out most was how their attention slowly turned toward me. At family gatherings, I noticed their glances, quick, measuring looks whenever I spoke or when I sat quietly eating. It was as if they had started piecing together their own picture of me. In their minds, I was the quiet one, the one who never spent money, the one who must have something put aside. I could almost hear the unspoken thought. Ethan probably has a little saved up. He never spends on anything anyway. They didn't say it outright at first, but the shift in their tone was clear. Questions like, "How's work been?" or "Still keeping busy these days?" were asked with a little too much curiosity. It wasn't interest in my life, it was calculation. I sat through it the same way I always had, calm and patient. They had no idea what I really had, no clue how much I had built over the years. To them, I was still the quiet brother who didn't know how to live. But in their eyes, I could see something new starting to grow, expectation. It was a quiet evening when Ryan called me again, but this time there was no bragging in his voice. He sounded forced, like he was trying to act casual while hiding something heavier. After a few minutes of small talk, he cleared his throat and said, "Hey, little brother, I know you've been living cheap all these years. Can you spot me a few thousand? I'll pay you back." For a moment, I didn't say anything. His words hit me in a strange way. It wasn't just the request, it was the way he said it. As if my years of careful living were nothing more than a joke, something small to dismiss. Still, I kept my voice calm. I told him gently that I couldn't help right now. The silence on the other end didn't last long. Ryan's tone changed instantly, sharp and biting. Figures, he snapped. You've been a leech your whole life. Can't even help your own brother when he needs you. I sat there holding the phone, listening as the anger poured out. A part of me wanted to remind him of all the years he had mocked me, of how he had never once thought of me as someone worth respecting. But instead, I stayed quiet. Nothing I could say would change the way he saw me. A few days later, Sophia called. At first, she acted sweet, asking how I was doing, but soon her words turned. She told me Ryan had shared what happened, and she said she couldn't believe I had turned him away. Family comes first, Ethan, she told me. You're being selfish. You're ungrateful. We would have helped you if the roles were reversed. Her words stung more than Ryan's. I had always believed Sophia was softer, more understanding. But now it felt like she was standing on the same side as him, seeing me not as her brother, but as someone who owed them. I wanted to ask her when exactly she or Ryan had ever helped me, but the words stayed trapped in my throat. That night, I sat alone and thought about it all. The years of jokes, the way I was treated like an embarrassment, and now this, being called selfish because I wouldn't hand over money. It wasn't about helping. It was about control. They weren't asking me as family. They were demanding it as if I owed them something. I felt the betrayal sink deep. It wasn't just the request. It was how quickly love turned into accusation, how fast brother and sister became words they used to make me feel guilty. I had stayed patient through their laughter, but this cut differently. They thought I had nothing, yet they expected me to give. And in their anger, they showed me what I truly meant to them. The day everything changed came during a family barbecue. It was a warm afternoon, the kind where the kids ran around the yard and the adults sat talking over the grill. I had parked my car on the side of the house and left my jacket inside it. I didn't think much of it. What I didn't realize was that Ryan, always curious and never respectful of boundaries, wandered over while everyone else was busy. Inside the car, he went through the glove box, pretending to look for something useful. Instead, he found an envelope I had left there by mistake. It wasn't meant to be carried around, but earlier in the week I had picked up some documents from my attorney. The envelope held bank statements, property deeds, and a summary of accounts. I hadn't locked it away yet. Ryan opened it, expecting maybe bills or boring papers, but his eyes widened as soon as he saw the numbers. Page after page told a story he had never imagined. Multiple properties listed under my name, shares in different companies, bank balances far higher than anything he could have guessed. By the time he reached the last page, he realized what it meant. His quiet little brother, the one he had mocked for years, was worth over $12 million. He slipped the papers back, but his face gave everything away when he rejoined the family. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a mix of shock and anger. He didn't wait long before exploding. Standing in front of everyone, he pointed at me and shouted, "You've been hiding millions from us while we struggled?" The words cut through the noise of the barbecue. The chatter stopped, the kids froze, and every eye turned toward me. Sophia's mouth fell open. "Is that true?" she asked, her voice shaky. My parents stayed silent, but the look on their faces said enough. They were stunned, too. Ryan wasn't finished. He waved his hand like he was exposing some great betrayal. "All these years, we thought you had nothing. We thought you were barely scraping by. And the whole time, you had all this money sitting there while we worked ourselves to the bone." The heat from the grill seemed to fade. The air was heavy, thick with their stares. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I set down my plate, stood up slowly, and looked Ryan in the eye. "It was never your business," I said calmly. The silence that followed was sharp. Sophia looked at me as if she didn't recognize the person standing in front of her. My parents lowered their eyes, unsure of what to say. Ryan's fists tightened, his face red with fury. In that instant, everything they had believed about me collapsed, and the truth they had never imagined was standing right in front of them. The moment the truth was out, Ryan didn't waste a second. His shock turned straight into anger, and his voice rose above everyone else's. "You're my brother," he said sharply. "Family means you share what you have. You've got more money than you'll ever need. So why are you keeping it all to yourself? You owe us." His tone wasn't asking, it was demanding, as if my hard work and years of discipline somehow belonged to him. Sophia, who had been sitting quietly with tears in her eyes, finally broke down. She looked straight at me and said, "I can't believe you let me struggle when you could have helped. I thought we were close, Ethan. I thought you cared about me and my family. How could you sit back and watch while we suffered?" Her words trembled, heavy with guilt tripping, but not once did she acknowledge how many times she had laughed at me before. Then came my parents. They didn't shout like Ryan, and they didn't cry like Sophia, but their words carried their own weight. My father cleared his throat and said, "Son, you should think carefully. We're family. Money is just money, but relationships are for life. Be generous, because family comes first." My mother nodded quickly, adding, Your brother and sister need help. You can make things right by stepping up. For years, I had sat in silence, letting their comments wash over me. I had endured being the punchline, the one nobody respected, the one who was easy to dismiss. But this time, something in me shifted. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I looked at each of them, one by one, and let my words come out steady. Do you even hear yourselves? For years, you mocked me. You treated me like I was nothing, like I was a failure, like I didn't deserve a place at this table. Not once did you respect me for who I was. And now, suddenly, you find out I have money, and you want to call me valuable. The room fell still. Ryan tried to cut me off, but I raised my hand. No, let me finish. You didn't respect me when I showed up in an old car. You didn't respect me when I wore plain clothes. You didn't respect me when you thought I had nothing. The only thing that changed is that you saw dollar signs. My voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. The words hung in the air, and for once, nobody had a quick reply. Ryan's jaw tightened, Sophia wiped her tears, and my parents looked down at the table. I had never stood up to them like that before, but I realized in that moment, the truth needed to be spoken. They wanted my wealth, but they had never wanted me, and that made all the difference. The silence didn't last long. Ryan slammed his hand on the table and leaned forward, his voice shaking with rage. You're selfish, Ethan. You're cruel. You've been sitting on a fortune while your own family needed help. What kind of brother does that? You're pathetic. His words came fast, filled with venom, and his face burned red as he pointed at me like I was a stranger who had betrayed him. Sophia's tears returned, but this time her anger pushed through them. This is revenge, isn't it? She cried. You're punishing us for the jokes, for how we treated you before. You're holding this over us just to watch us hurt. You could change our lives with one check, but you'd rather stand there and prove a point. Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed fixed on me, accusing, pleading, and bitter all at once. Their words cut, not because they were true, but because they showed me what I really meant to them. No matter how I lived, no matter what I said, they didn't see me as a brother, a son, or even a man. To them, I was a wallet, a solution to their mistakes, a pile of money with my name on it. Nothing more. The room grew hotter with every insult, every demand. My parents stayed quiet now, but their silence said enough. They weren't defending me. They weren't standing up against the cruelty spilling from Ryan and Sophia. They were just waiting for me to break and give in. I took a deep breath, stood up slowly, and pushed my chair back. My movements were calm, but inside something had snapped. I looked at them all, my brother, my sister, my parents, and spoke with a steady voice that didn't rise above theirs yet cut through everything they had just said. You lost me long before you lost my money. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of years. Ryan froze, Sophia's tears stopped for a second, and even my parents looked stunned. I didn't wait for their replies. I didn't want to hear more anger or guilt or begging. I turned away, walked to the door, and stepped outside into the cool air. Behind me, their voices rose again. Ryan shouted my name, cursing, demanding I come back. Sophia's sobs followed, broken and sharp. My parents called out too, their tone caught between pleading and frustration. But I didn't turn around. I walked across the yard, each step feeling lighter than the one before. Their shouting faded as I reached my car, opened the door, and sat inside. For once, I wasn't the quiet one sitting in silence because I was ashamed. I was silent because I was done. They had shown me what I truly meant to them, and I wasn't going to forget it. A few days passed after the barbecue, and the silence was broken by a loud banging on my front door. Ryan's voice carried through the walls, angry and demanding. Open up, Ethan. You can't just walk away like that. We're family, and you owe us. Do you hear me? You owe us. His fists pounded harder, shaking the door, but I stayed where I was, sitting quietly inside. I didn't move, didn't answer, didn't give him what he wanted. After several minutes of shouting and threats, his voice grew hoarse, and finally, his car engine roared as he drove away. The quiet that followed felt heavier than his yelling. Not long after, Sophia began sending messages. At first, they were soft, filled with guilt. We're your family, Ethan. Families don't turn their backs on each other. Then they shifted, trying to remind me of our bond. Do you remember when we were kids, how close we used to be? Don't throw that away now. You're hurting us more than you know. Her words sounded caring on the surface, but underneath them was the same pressure. Give us money, or you're the bad one. I read every message, but I didn't reply. A week later, my parents showed up at my house. When I opened the door, they looked tired, carrying the weight of disappointment in their eyes. My mother was the first to speak. We're sorry about how things went the other night, she said softly. My father nodded, adding, it wasn't right, but you know your brother and sister are struggling. They're your family. Even a little help would mean so much. Their voices weren't sharp like Ryan's or desperate like Sophia's. They were measured, almost rehearsed, but the message was the same. They weren't there because they wanted to see me. They were there because they wanted what I had. I listened, then shook my head gently. I can't do that, I said, my voice calm. Not now, not ever. My mother frowned, my father sighed, and without another word, they turned back to their car. I closed the door slowly, leaning against it for a long moment. The house felt too quiet, yet in that quiet was the truth I couldn't ignore. I sat alone that evening, letting the weight of it settle in. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what the money revealed. For years, I had been treated like I was nothing, and now, when they finally saw my worth, it wasn't me they cared about, it was what I could give them. The realization cut deep. Blood ties didn't matter if love and respect weren't there. I had lost the illusion of family, but in losing it, I had gained clarity. They had made their choice long ago, and now I was making mine. The night was quiet when I heard the sound of tires screeching outside my house. A moment later, Ryan's voice cut through the stillness, loud and angry. He was standing in my driveway, shouting my name again and again. His fists slammed against the front door, his words filled with rage. You think you're better than us, Ethan? You think you can just walk away from your own family? Open this door and face me. His voice cracked, but I didn't move. I stood by the window, watching him through the blind. His face was red with fury, his body tense, his eyes wild. For a brief moment, I thought about stepping outside, about trying one last time to explain. But then the truth washed over me like a wave. I had explained enough. I had endured enough. Nothing I said or did would ever change what was in their hearts. To them, I wasn't a brother or a son. I was a wallet. And I had no desire to be that anymore. I took a slow breath, lowered the blinds, and turned the lock on the window. Ryan's voice grew louder, angrier, but it sounded far away now, muffled by the walls I had built. Not just the walls of my home, but the walls around my heart. I walked to the front door, placed my hand on the handle, and then let go. I turned the deadbolt, sealing it tight. With that small act, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just the door I was closing. It was everything that had chained me to years of mockery, betrayal, and disappointment. As I stepped back into the stillness of my living room, I felt the weight of the years behind me. They had called me cheap, weak, unworthy. They had laughed at me for living simply, never knowing why I chose the path I did. They believed I had nothing, but in reality, I had everything they lacked: discipline, patience, and peace. I sank into my chair, listening as Ryan's shouts faded into the night. Eventually, his car engine started, and the noise of his anger disappeared down the street. Silence filled the house again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was freeing. I thought back on my life, on the years of being the outcast in my own family. And now, in this moment, I finally understood. Family isn't defined by blood alone. It's built on respect, love, and loyalty. And those were things my brother, my sister, and even my parents had never given me. So I made peace with it. I wasn't shutting the door out of hate. I was shutting it to protect myself, to guard the life I had worked so hard to build. They had chosen greed. I chose peace. And in the end, peace was the greater wealth.